Hello and welcome to the Social Ties, a new series here on Socialist Think Tanks channel. We aim to talk to people from community organising groups, campaigns, protests and all things grassroots. This is our first show and I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome Rachel Meenan. Hello Rachel.
Hello, hiya.
How are you doing?
I'm not bad, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. It's really good to see you. I'm so pleased we've got you back on the show for a proper interview. So as you know, I invited you on here today to talk a little bit about the organisation that you're part of. Would you mind telling us a little bit about that?
So I'm involved with an organisation called Northeast Against Racism. And Northeast Against Racism was set up last June. And really the thinking behind setting up Northeast Against Racism was really to as a platform to bring together all the existing anti-racist groups and anti-racist activists across the region. And I know sort of over the last few years, the Northeast really has been a target for far-right activity. I think the Prevent statistics from 2018 to 2019 said that there was more far-right activity in the Northeast than any other region outside of London. So it really was to sort of coordinate for anti-racist groups and anti-racist activists across the region. And I think it did feel like a lot of the time as an anti-racist activist, we were continuously responding to far-right activity. Sort of going back to 2018, 2019, it felt like there was almost a counter demonstration nearly every weekend. And it felt like we were simply just reacting to stuff. So a lot of the thinking behind Northeast Against Racism was to be really sort of proactive in challenging racism and challenging hate. So when we launched back in June, we wrote out to existing anti-racist groups. We wrote out to organisations which support refugees and asylum seekers, to trade unions, to local MPs and councillors, to hate crime leads and hate crime initiatives across the local authorities, with a view really to working collaboratively and working proactively in challenging racism and challenging hate. And as I said previously, we launched in June, and then actually in the week that we launched our website and we launched on social media, it was the week that George Floyd was murdered and that Black Lives Matter really sort of erupted here in the UK. So our first event that we really supported was the 3,000 strong Black Lives Matter demonstration in Newcastle, which was just absolutely fantastic. And we saw, you know, a whole new layer of anti-racists and activists who were inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement. The following week, we had another demonstration. We supported another demonstration in Newcastle, which is the one that people may recall was attacked by the far right, and was really quite one of the most violent scenes we've seen here in the Northeast for a long time. And we then went for a third demonstration in Newcastle the week after, really to sort of consolidate that Black Lives Matter message and to get away from the violence of the far right and to really sort of have a peaceful celebration with that message of Black Lives Matter at the heart. Since then, we've really, we've worked with all sorts of groups. We work across the region with existing anti-racism groups. So we work with Sunderland Unites, with the Battle of Stockton. We work with Hartlepool Against Racism, County Durham Unites. And we worked with a group of health workers over the summer called the Northeast Health Workers Network. And they had a demonstration in August and a campaign around pay justice and about getting a pay rise. And on that demonstration, we led an equalities block, really highlighting the disproportionate impact that COVID-19 has had on the BAME community and BAME health workers, and also highlighting the fact, that our NHS is built by migrants and it's built by the Windrush generation. We have worked over the summer with the LGBTQ plus community. So we took part in a Northern Pride event and also a trans day of remembrance to remember all the trans people who've lost their lives as a result of hate. We've also, one of the aims of NIA is to work collaboratively with groups that support refugees and asylum seekers. So we've done a lot of work with local groups, and we also set up to become a collection point for Care for Calais. We felt that was really important. Obviously, you know, this last year has been incredibly challenging for all of us, but particularly for refugees and asylum seekers in Calais at the moment, things are really, you know, incredibly difficult. So we felt it was really important to show our solidarity with refugees in Calais. We had 2 collection points in the back end of last year. So the first one was in Newcastle. We had a collection point at Brunswick Methodist Church, where we got donations of clothing, of food, of toiletries, and other essential items. And then I think it was the 31st of October, we had another collection point in Sunderland with our friend, which was organised by our friend at Sunderland Unites. And that was just incredible in terms of the sheer amount that we had donated. It really did, it exceeded our expectations. And particularly, you know, we work very closely with Sunderland Unites, and Sunderland over the last few years has been a particular target for far-right activity, and with the far-right trying to scapegoat refugees and migrants for issues in society, you know, the housing crisis, and other issues in society. So it was really significant to see the amount that was donated by people in Sunderland. We also had a hairdressers in Sunderland, which set up to be a collection point for anyone who couldn't make it to the main collection point at Sunderland Minster. So it was brilliant. I think we ended up coming away with about 8 or 9 carloads of donations. And it was really heartening, because obviously, you know, going back to the fact we're in the middle of a pandemic, and it's a really challenging time. The pandemic has implications for people financially in terms of their health, but to see that solidarity from people in Sunderland with refugees was fantastic.
Wow, that's just unbelievable, Rachel. I can't believe how much good work you lot have done. It's so impressive. I think you need to maybe think about changing the name from Northeast Against Racism to just Northeast Against Hate, because you seem to sort of stretch out into so many different aspects of hate crime, really. You mentioned there about obviously this year's been really challenging in terms of the pandemic and not being able to get out physically and protest, at least since the Black Lives Matter protest. How are you managing to reach people? What sort of things are you doing to sort of get your message out?
It has, you know, as you say, it has been incredibly difficult. The fact that we established NIA in the middle of a pandemic, and it has limited what we've been able to do in terms of actually physically meeting up. There was that window of opportunity over the summer when we were able to have the Black Lives Matter demonstrations and the health workers demonstration, and then obviously we've had the collections, which we had to be very mindful to socially distance, and we adhered to that. And one of the things that, in terms of the donations, we had intended to actually deliver those to Calais over the Christmas. So we were due to go, we had our van hired and we had everything booked, and just before Christmas there was the travel ban placed on the UK. Which meant there was a massive backlog. And then now, obviously, with all of the restrictions and all of the mandatory COVID testing, it's looking unlikely at this time that we will actually physically get across to Calais with this lot of donations, but we will be delivering them down to Kent, where Care for Calais have just opened a new warehouse for donations. But in terms of the limitations, created by the lockdown and the current situation, we have tried to have a lot of online activity as well. So just before Christmas, we had an event which was about really sort of an opportunity for those people who've got personal experience of being a refugee or seeking asylum to talk about their experiences. And we've all seen in the press and the media, there's a lot of misconceptions and there's a lot of untruths that are peddled by the right-wing media and right-wing politicians about asylum seekers and refugees. And we almost saw this event as almost like an educational tool, which can be used by anti-racists and anti-racist groups to dispel some of these myths and misconceptions about refugees and asylum seekers, and really to get over that human story and that human experience. So we were joined by 3 speakers, Smayo, MD, and a lady called Claudia, who spoke about their own experiences of why they came to the UK, of sort of navigating the immigration system, of the difficulties they faced, examples of the hostile environment they faced, but also the support that they got from people and from organisations here in the North East. And we felt that was very important, that there are a lot of meetings that go, that we have, where people talk about the experiences of refugees and asylum seekers, but they don't necessarily hear those experiences firsthand from those people who have been refugees and asylum seekers. So we felt that was very important to get that message across, and this is something that we would like to expand on in the future. We also have an event coming up this Sunday as part of Holocaust Memorial Day. So to mark Holocaust Memorial Day, we have an event which looks at almost the lasting legacy of genocide. So the speakers that we have either have personal experience of surviving genocide, or they have family members who've been survivors of genocide and the Holocaust. So we have Smayo, who's speaking, who is the chair of the Bosnian Community North East, and a survivor of the Bosnian genocide who came over to the UK as a child. We have a speaker called Ilana, who used to be the president of the Jewish Society at Newcastle University, and she is the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor, and one of the last people to come over to the UK as part of the kindergarten transport. And we've also got a speaker called Dorothy, who's a long-standing anti-racist activist here in the North East, who recently traced our family history and found that many of our relatives on our father's side were murdered during the Holocaust. So she'll be speaking about that and about remembering our family. But it was very much that lasting legacy of genocide and how we can learn those lessons from the past. Every year when we have Holocaust Memorial Day, we have right-wing politicians come out and, they make really passionate speeches about never again. And then the rest of the year, they're actually pushing a narrative and implementing policies which create division and which create hate and which perpetuate that. So it was very much the idea of the meeting is to get over that human aspect and the human cost of genocide, and to get, to hear from people who've been impacted by that personally.
Dear me, that just sounds equally heartbreaking and impressive. I think that event is going to be a really difficult one for a lot of people to watch, but I think an important one for people to watch. I'll certainly
Yeah,
be watching it. It sounds like probably tissues at the ready for that. But you're right though. These stories are not the ones that get told, are they? They're the ones that get sort of glossed over, and you forget to think about the cost
yeah,
of it because nobody really talks about it. So can you
yes.
tell us exactly how we can access that? How do we get onto this, to the Holocaust Memorial Day that you're putting on?
So it will be live streamed on our Facebook page, Bosnian Community Northeast Facebook page, this Sunday at 5 o'clock. And again, going back to that, that message of never again, we saw just 2 weeks ago, with Trump supporters storming the Capitol wearing Camp Auschwitz t-shirts, that we really do need to learn those lessons from the past and remember those lessons.
You're absolutely right. It's they've just become emboldened again, haven't they? I mean, these attitudes have always been there, but they certainly, I feel like you mentioned earlier on, you're seeing a rise in this hatred, and the far right are being emboldened. Thankfully, Trump has just gone, but his legacy is still
Yeah,
there. That's hanging about.
that
Um,
ideology is,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So you've said obviously there that the right wing are sort of coming out in force. Because of that, have you seen a rise in sort of the anti-fascist movement and the anti-racist movement? Have you seen more people wanting to get involved since the rise of this hatred?
I think Black Lives Matter has definitely been a force that has inspired people to get involved in anti-racism activity. And I know from the demonstrations that we've had here and that we've had elsewhere, it really has. We've seen a whole new layer of anti-racist and anti-racist and activists come forward. And I also think Black Lives Matter has highlighted a lot of the institutional and systemic racism that exists. And the fact that we, our criminal justice system, our education system often perpetuates racism. And we're starting to see conversations about removing street signs that have links to Britain's colonial past. We're seeing conversations about removing statues. We're seeing statues being pulled down that have got a link to Britain's colonial past and the slave trade. And I think it's really shone a light on that, and campaigning to decolonize the education system.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you there. One thing I'm really interested in, Rachel, all this work that you've done has been so impressive. And I would encourage anybody to get involved, anybody who's even remotely interested in this. But that brings me to the reason, why are you interested in this? What was it that got you involved in anti-racism causes? And in particular, how did that lead you to begin Northeast Against Racism?
I mean, I've always hated and opposed racism and any sort of hatred and discrimination and prejudice. And I think, as a socialist, the anti-racism struggle is inherent to the fight for socialism and the fight for equality. And I think, we live in a society where where racism is a tool that is used by capitalism to divide people, but also see that hatred and that discrimination against other groups in society as well. We see that against the LGBTQ plus community. We see that in misogyny and sexism. We see that in crimes against disabled people and people with disabilities. So I think it is all part of that struggle. And one of the things that we particularly wanted to do with Northeast Against Racism is, because we saw, particularly around the summer, and a whole new layer of people get involved in anti-racism work around Black Lives Matter and inspired by Black Lives Matter, we wanted to really also highlight how here in the Northeast, the Northeast has a really strong tradition of fighting racism and fascism. So we worked particularly closely with the Battle of Stockton campaign. And just before Christmas, we met with the Durham Miners Association, with a view to really linking up how the trade union movement have been vital to the fight against racism and fascism.
That's brilliant. I think you're right in what you say, that collective action is always the way forward, isn't it? And it seems like you were working with, all the right people all across the Northeast. So how, if people do want to get involved and join Northeast Against Racism, or one of even the other campaigning bodies, how best to do that?
So NEAR is open to anyone who's anti-racist. We had an AGM back in July, so not long after we'd formed. And at that AGM, we appointed certain roles and officers to try and make the group as inclusive as possible. So we have a women's lead, we have an accessibility lead, we have an LGBTQ plus officer, and we're constantly trying to make the group as inclusive as possible. So it really is open to anyone who wants to get involved. You can message us on Facebook. We have a website that you can actually sign up for the membership list. So people can get in contact by either of those ways. And we also work really closely with the regional groups. So again, we work with County Durham Unites, with Sunderland, with Hartlepool Against Racism, with the Battle of Stockton. So if someone's in a particular area, we can also, put you in touch with those regional groups as well. So our membership, our sort of core membership, is really made up of people who are in other anti-racism groups as well.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love to hear a good solidarity story there. I think that's fantastic. And you're right in what you say about the socialism side of it. Obviously, on Socialist Think Tank, that's what we're all about. And I think you're right. It does interlink with anti-racist causes and anti-hate causes and all of that. So it's just brilliant to see. And I think the work you're doing is just utterly fantastic. So for
Thank
one
you.
more time then, how do people access this Holocaust Memorial Day on Sunday?
So it's this Sunday at 5 o'clock. It'll be live streamed onto the Northeast Against Racism Facebook page and the Bosnian Community Northeast Facebook page.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being with us today, Rachel. I really appreciate it. Technical
Thank you
issues
very much for
aside,
having us.
it's been wonderful. Thank you so much. Please don't forget to find us on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. Like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you all again soon.